Welcome. Tonight, we begin with a medieval mindset that still runs our life. Take a slow breath and let the modern world begin to fade. The glow of your screen, the steady ticking of your clock, the endless stream of notifications, all of it seems so new. But in truth, much of what surrounds you isn't new at all. You live, without knowing it, by rules that were written centuries ago in monasteries, in castles in the quiet stone halls of the Middle Ages. Every hour you keep, every polite word you use, every day you set aside for rest or ritual, all of it is a whisper from that long-ago world. This evening, we will wander there together. Not in haste and not in drama, but slowly, gently, step by step, as if walking through candlelight. For the next hour, we will explore the quiet persistence of the medieval mind, the rules, customs, and habits that still shape your life, long after their meaning has faded. We begin where every day began in the 12th century, with sound, with the slow tolling of bells, with time itself. Imagine yourself in a medieval town. It is early morning, before sunrise. The streets are narrow, quiet, and damp. The smell of smoke hangs low, mingling with the scent of wet stone and straw. Then across the stillness, a bell begins to ring, once, twice. Slowly, deliberately. It rolls through the fog and touches every rooftop, every stable, every field. This sound is not a decoration. It is a command. You rise because it tells you to. Everyone does. For in the 12th century, no one owned a clock. The day was divided not by machines or minutes, but by the voice of bronze and air. The bell was the measure of life itself. In monasteries, where the rhythm of time was first kept, the bell was sacred. It called monks to prayer 7 times a day matins, before dawn, lauds at sunrise, prime, when the first labor began, then terce, sext, none, vespers, and finally compline, as darkness settled again. These weren't mere interruptions. They were the pulse of the world, an invisible spine around which each day bent and rested. Outside those monastery walls, peasants learned to follow the same rhythm. They woke when the first bell sounded from the church tower. They worked through the long stretch of daylight, pausing at noon for the Angelus, a short prayer, a bite of bread, a shared silence. When the evening bell rang, the fields emptied. Tools were set aside. Fires were lit. Even the animals came to know the sound. Oxen lifted their heads. Dogs barked once, and then all grew still again. Over generations, the habit became instinct. The bell divided the day more precisely than the sun. It told bakers when to begin their dough, merchants when to open their stalls, and even lovers when to part. But there was something else behind those chimes, something that still shapes you. The bell didn't only mark time, it controlled it. It taught entire societies to move together, to obey an invisible rhythm set by someone else. That obedience was comforting and also deeply powerful. The person who held the rope inside the bell tower, the monk, the priest, the caretaker held the rhythm of every life below. To delay the ringing was to delay the day itself. Time became an instrument of order, and from that order grew a strange new virtue, punctuality. To arrive when the bell called became a sign of discipline, even holiness. To be late was more than an inconvenience, it was disobedience, a small failure of the soul. When towns began to prosper, the bell's importance only grew. Merchants depended on it to open their markets, apprentices to begin their work, and mayors to announce meetings. Each town wanted its own clock tower, taller and louder than the next. The first mechanical clocks appeared in the 14th century. They were heavy wooden frames driven by falling weights, their gears carved by hand. They had no faces, no numbers, only hammers that struck iron bells every hour. People didn't watch time, they heard it. The bell was more than a measure. It was pride. Cities competed for the most beautiful tone, the deepest resonance. A good bell could be heard for miles, a sound that told travelers where they were and citizens who they were. Yet for all their grandeur, these bells still belonged to the same monastic rhythm. Even the merchant's hour of trade was a faint echo of prime, the monk's hour of prayer, the noon post sext, the evening rest vespers. Your modern lunch break, your evening commute, your notion of a weekend, they all descend from this schedule of prayer and toil. You still live by those bells. Your phone's alarm, your calendar reminders, the hourly chime of the office clock, they are all descendants of the same idea, that life must move in sync. But the world that once listened to bells had one mercy we've lost: silence. Between the hours, the bell stopped. Time rested. You could, for a moment, forget the measure of your life and simply live it. Now your bell never stops. It lives in your pocket. It vibrates, glows, insists. The rhythm that once united entire villages now demands attention from you alone. Still, the echo remains. Every structured hour of your day, every shared schedule, every 9 to 5 traces back to the cloisters and towers of the Middle Ages. If you stand someday near an old cathedral and the bell begins to ring, pause for a moment. Listen. It is the sound of 1,000 years collapsing into one. A bridge between their world and yours. A rhythm that once belonged to faith, now quietly ticking inside the machines that rule your life. The bell fades. The air stills. And we drift gently from sound to law, from the rhythm that ruled your days to the rules that still govern your world. The bells fade into silence, and in that quiet, another kind of rhythm begins. Not of sound, but of rules. Of words written on parchment, sealed in wax, carried by riders on tired horses through the countryside. You might think of law as something modern, as bureaucracy, as paperwork, as the invisible web of government. But all of it began here, in the reign of King Henry II of England, more than 8 centuries ago. It is the year 1166. The king sits at a long table, maps of his realm spread before him. His lands stretch from Scotland to the Pyrenees, England, and great parts of France. And yet, he rules not by the sword, but by something quieter, the written word. Until his reign, law had been a local matter. Every village, every shire, every noble lord had his own customs, his own punishments, his own ways of settling disputes. Justice was personal and often brutal, a matter of reputation, vengeance, or divine chance. If you were accused of theft, you might have to plunge your arm into boiling water to prove your innocence, trusting that God would protect the truthful. If you were charged with murder, you might have to fight your accuser in a trial by combat. And if you lost, well, that was judgment enough. Henry looked at this chaos and saw disorder, a danger not just to people, but to his power. For every local lord who held his own court, the king's authority grew weaker. And so, he decided to create a single system, one law to bind them all. It began with something simple, the Assize of Clarendon, written in 1166. In this document, Henry ordered that 12 honest men from each district must come together, swear an oath, and name anyone in their community suspected of a serious crime. This was the birth of what we now call the jury. Not yet a trial jury, but a body of local knowledge meant to replace rumor and vengeance with collective truth. You may not realize it, but every time you are called for jury duty, you answer the echo of that ancient summons. A medieval oath, disguised as civic duty. From this came other inventions, things you now take for granted. The king sent itinerant justices, traveling judges who rode from town to town, carrying royal authority with them. Wherever they went, they recorded their decisions, and these records became the first common law. A body of precedent, a library of rulings meant to outlive the moment. It was bureaucracy, slow, careful, and deeply human. And it was revolutionary. When you fill out a form today, a claim, an affidavit, a signature beneath a legal phrase, you are performing a ritual born in that same age. The idea that the written record, not the memory of a person, defines justice. That the law must exist outside of the moment, in ink, so it cannot be undone by anger or fear. Henry's system spread across Europe, and eventually across the oceans. Wherever English influence went, to America, to Canada, to Australia, his law followed like a shadow. But the beauty of this order came with a quiet irony. The law was never truly meant to serve the people. It was meant to serve the crown. Every oath sworn, every trial recorded, every decision written down was a thread connecting each subject to the king's will. Justice, in Henry's eyes, was not about fairness, it was about control. If a man broke the peace, it wasn't his neighbor's injury that mattered most, but the king's. It was called the king's peace. A sacred idea that all wrongdoing, great or small, was an offense against royal authority. You still live under it. Every time you see the phrase, the people versus, in a courtroom, every time a judge says, the crown, the state, or the commonwealth, you are hearing the faint echo of the king's peace. Justice as the property of power. Henry's system relied on something else too. Paperwork. Endless, repetitive, meticulous paperwork. Rolls of parchment. The pipe rolls, they were called, on which every fine, every tax, Every judgment was recorded. A slow river of ink flowing through decades. To modern ears, it sounds dull. But this was the machinery of civilization itself. The creation of bureaucracy, that invisible world of scribes, clerks, and couriers that still defines your life today. Every file in an office cabinet, every spreadsheet, every digital record on a government server, all of them are descendants of those rolls of calfskin. Each a symbol of faith in writing over memory, of permanence over personality. It's strange to think that in Henry's time, reading and writing were almost sacred acts. Few could write, fewer still could read. A signature was a mark of divine privilege, a symbol of authority, not equality. And yet, those signatures gave birth to modern citizenship, where every person, in theory, stands equal before the law. Still, beneath that equality, the old structure remains. The court, the judge on high, the orderly ranks, the standing and sitting, the bowing before the bench, all of it is medieval theater, a performance of hierarchy disguised as fairness. It's not malicious, not evil, simply inherited. We built our fairness from their obedience. We copied their solemn gestures, even as we forgot why they began. And so, when you next hear someone swear an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, remember, that phrase is older than the language you speak. It was once sworn on relics, before the bones of saints, beneath flickering candles in stone chapels. Truth in the medieval world was not a matter of fact, but of faith. The law sought not what was real, but what was acceptable, what restored peace. When Henry's judges rode through muddy villages and cold cathedrals, they were not chasing truth, they were chasing order. And when you look at your modern courts, your legal systems, your contracts, you are seeing the same pursuit. Law is, at its heart, the art of keeping chaos at bay. It is a language of control wrapped in the illusion of choice. And though the forms have changed from quills to keyboards, from wax seals to digital signatures, the spirit remains the same. A quiet faith in written words. A belief that ink and language can make the world behave. The wax cools. The document rolls closed. And with that, another piece of the medieval mind slips silently into your own. Beyond the parchment and the crown, beyond the language of judgment and peace, life continued at tables, in halls, among families learning the subtler laws of civility. As the bell marked your hours and the king marked your conduct, another set of rules began to shape the spaces between. The rules of behavior, of gesture, of grace. We turn now from the courtroom to the dining hall. From the authority of the king to the delicate dance of courtesy. Picture this. You push open a heavy wooden door and step into a great hall. A massive fire roars in the hearth, warming your face. The air smells of burning oak, slow roasting meat, and the earthy aroma of freshly baked bread. All around you, candlelight flickers, dancing across carved wooden beams and huge tapestries that show knights and saints, battles long past, and tales of virtue. It's mealtime. A simple moment, yet one that's wrapped in rules that, believe it or not, still touch our lives today. You might think of table manners as just being polite, something your parents taught you to make conversation smoother. But back in the Middle Ages, these rules were far more than just charming customs. They were about survival, and they were about social control. At this table, you won't find the silverware you're used to. There are no forks, at least not for most people. Knives are often shared, passed from one person to the next. You have to be incredibly careful where you point that blade and where you set it down. A moment of rudeness wasn't just impolite. It could be dangerous, even deadly. Eating with your fingers is completely normal here. But your hands must be washed before the meal begins. Failing to do so was considered shameful. Monks, nobles, and even wealthy merchants all practiced this ritual hand washing, often using a basin filled with perfumed water. It was an early form of etiquette that was a quiet nod to hygiene, safety, and your status in the room. The table itself is a stage, and where you sit is everything. It's all dictated by rank. At the head of the room, on a raised platform called the high table, sit the lord and his lady. They're closest to the fire, they get the best cuts of food, and they hold the most honor. Below them, the servants and less important guests are arranged with precision. This isn't just about comfort. It's a visual, constant reinforcement of the social hierarchy. Even the way you sit is being watched. Elbows off the table, back straight, your gaze modest. You are performing civility like it's a suit of armor, and your politeness is a weapon. It's here, surrounded by the clatter of plates and the glow of candlelight, that a fascinating change begins to happen. During this period, courtesy books became popular. Works like Erasmus's On Civility in Children started to write down these rules, turning them from simple gestures into a whole system of thought. Politeness becomes a language away to signal your intelligence, your virtue, and your social standing. Saying please and thank you aren't just empty words. They are your armor and your grace. And these manners were more than just symbolic. They were survival skills. Sharing a knife the right way, passing a slice of bread called a trencher correctly, showing the proper respect to the Lord. A single mistake could lead to public shame, the loss of favor, or much worse. The middle-class merchant, the humble servant, the visiting noble, everyone had to navigate these rituals every single day. In a society where conflict was always just around the corner, good manners helped keep the peace. Notice the subtle repetition in these rituals. Washing your hands before the meal. Lifting a cup to your lips without spilling a drop. Waiting for the Lord to take his first bite before anyone else touches their food. These repeated actions echo through time, right into your own dining habits, your sense of what's proper, and even your gut feelings about manners at a modern dinner party. Imagine yourself taking a bite. You feel the warmth of the bread, taste the savory roasted meat, and hear the soft laughter around you. The room smells of rich stew and melting candle wax, and the shadows from the tapestries seem to ripple across the floor. In the middle of this simple meal lies a complex web of expectations, a social rhythm that's as steady as a monastery bell or the routine of a king's court. Even the food itself follows strict rules. What you ate, when you ate it, and in what order, all of it was governed by centuries of custom. A noble might demand meat before bread, while a servant might only get coarse bread in small portions. You weren't just eating to feed your body. You were eating to announce your place in the world. This forkless, candlelit table was a theater of power and hierarchy, quiet, invisible, and incredibly persistent. And yet there's joy here too. Meals were important social gatherings. They were chances for conversation, for making deals, and for telling stories. You can hear the low murmur of voices, the happy laugh of a child sitting next to her grandmother, and the quiet discussion of a trade agreement between two merchants. This same space teaches civility, community, and even patience, virtues that have traveled across the centuries and still linger in our dining rooms, classrooms, and offices today. As the meal winds down, we see another subtle innovation: hand washing again. Plates are cleared away and leftovers are carefully arranged. It's all about ritual, repetition, and order. Politeness becomes a rhythm. That rhythm becomes a habit. And that habit becomes culture. In the quiet moments after the meal, as the candles burn low and the fire crackles softly, you can almost feel the legacy of these manners stretching into our modern world. These rules of courtesy, seemingly so minor, almost invisible, still shape our gestures, our words, and even the way we move through social spaces. From shared knives to whispered etiquette, from careful hand-washing to staying quiet at the Lord's table, medieval manners were the architecture of civility. They shaped society gently but persistently, like water slowly carving stone. And now, as the candles fade and the hall grows quiet, we leave the table. But the lessons of courtesy linger in the air, waiting to be discovered again in the small, gentle rituals of your own life. From this dining hall, we're going to move into a space that is both larger and quieter, a calendar of feasts, fasts, and holy days. It's a rhythm that ordered the entire year, and as we'll see in our next segment, it was a force that shaped how people lived, worked, and thought, influencing our own sense of time even today. Imagine stepping out of a warm, bustling dining hall into a quiet village square. The morning air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and freshly baked bread. Above you, the dark silhouette of a church tower rises against the pale sky. Its bell begins to toll, slowly, deliberately, each chime marking not just the hour, but the very rhythm of life itself. This rhythm, established centuries ago in places just like this, still echoes in our lives today. It's woven into the calendar on your wall, shaping your holidays, your weekends, and even the pace of your work week. The logic might be long forgotten, but the structure remains, a ghost in the machine of modern time. Take the 7-day week, for instance. It feels so natural, so fundamental, but it wasn't always a universal standard. Many ancient cultures had different cycles, some shorter, some longer. It was the medieval church that truly standardized the 7-day week across Europe, aligning work, rest, and worship into a predictable, repeating pattern that we still follow. Sunday became the cornerstone of this new order. It was declared a sacred day of rest, a time for reflection, and a point for the community to gather. This simple decree laid the foundation for something we now take for granted, the weekend. The entire concept of a break from labor, a clear division between work time and leisure time, finds its deepest roots in this quiet ecclesiastical mandate. Before this, for many, work simply continued until it was done. The church gave time a shape, a rhythm of effort and release. And it wasn't just the weeks. The church also gave us the ancestors of our modern holidays. Feast days were once vital to the spiritual life of a community. Think of Christmas, Easter, or All Saints' Day. In the medieval world, these were far more than just celebrations. They were profound markers in the calendar, essential pauses in the otherwise relentless cycle of agricultural toil and daily labor. Picture it. Villagers across the land would pause their work in the fields and workshops. They would gather at the church, the heart of their community, listening to ancient chants and prayers. During these moments, time itself seemed to bend and stretch, aligning with the grander cycles of the seasons and the sacred stories of their faith. These weren't just days off. They were moments of collective meaning that punctuated the year, offering both spiritual renewal and a much-needed physical rest. Fasting, too, played a crucial role in shaping the medieval calendar and directly our own relationship with food and mealtime. The 40 days of Lent, leading up to Easter, were a period of solemn observance where meat and other rich foods were forbidden. Fridays, throughout the year, often mandated abstinence from meat as a form of penance. This rhythm of scarcity and indulgence taught more than just religious doctrine. It instilled discipline, patience, and a deep appreciation for abundance when it returned. It also profoundly shaped culinary traditions. The seasons of food were dictated not just by agriculture, but by ritual. Bread, root vegetables, and preserved fish dominated the lean times of winter and Lent. Rich meats, fresh fruits, and celebratory pies were reserved for feast days. Each meal was infused with a meaning that went far beyond mere appetite. Then there were the saints' days, scattered like jewels throughout the year. These were the early predecessors of our birthdays and personal anniversaries. A village might honor its patron saint, St. George, St. Catherine, St. Nicholas, with special services, processions, songs, and small offerings. These were intensely local, personal celebrations that connected people to their history and to a specific spiritual protector. Over centuries, many of these celebrations became secularized, losing their direct religious context. Yet the pattern of marking special days for individuals or communities remains, echoed in how we celebrate birthdays, national heroes, and even Valentine's Day. The church didn't just structure days and weeks. It structured the entire year, creating a grand sweeping narrative. The liturgical calendar divided time into sacred seasons like Advent and Lent, and periods of what was called ordinary time. This sacred framework was beautifully interwoven with the agricultural rhythms of planting and harvest, and with the social obligations of the community. Imagine walking through a medieval village over the course of a full year. You'd see the changing colors of the seasons reflected in the decorations and vestments of the church. You'd feel the pace of life quicken with the joy of a summer feast, then slow to a quiet solemnity during the fasts of winter. Each cycle of prayer, fasting, and celebration created a comforting predictability, a sense of belonging to a larger, enduring order that transcended one's own short life. It gave people a map for their journey through time. Even today, as you glance at your digital calendar, that medieval structure is still there, hiding in plain sight. The 7-day week, the months named long ago, the major holidays that disrupt our schedules, all of these are echoes of that ecclesiastical planning. Your Sunday brunch, your Christmas break, even a casual reference to St. Paddy's Day, they all carry centuries of that ancient rhythm in their bones. And within this structured passage of time, life itself has always flowed. Births, marriages, deaths, the great milestones of human existence were recorded and sanctified within this framework. The gentle ticking of the hours once answered to the church bell. Now, it answers to the clock on your phone. Time, which was once seen as divine, communal, and cyclical, has become personal, mechanical, and linear. And yet, it still whispers the rules laid down in stone cathedrals and by candlelight, centuries and centuries ago. The past is never truly gone. It just learns to speak in a different voice. Now, as we leave the sacred rhythm of the medieval year, we move into a more intimate, but equally structured social sphere. We'll explore the origins of marriage rules, wedding rituals, and the vows that bind two people together. Because even today, when you see a wedding ring on a finger, or hear a couple exchange their promises, you are glimpsing a tradition forged. In the same medieval world, a world that continues to shape how we love, commit, and build our lives together. Imagine the air thick with incense, flickering candles casting long shadows along stone walls. A deep hush of anticipation hangs in the air, the kind that feels like it's slowing down time itself. You might picture this as a moment of pure romance, a choice made by two people in love. But if we were in medieval Europe, you'd be witnessing something very different. Here, marriage was less about matters of the heart and far more about social order, legal contracts, and community obligation. Before the church stepped in, marriage was a messy patchwork of local customs. It was often just a private deal struck between two families. But as the church's influence grew, it sought to bring order to this chaos. It gradually took control, transforming marriage into a sacred, ritualized, and highly structured institution. In fact, many of the traditions you see in weddings today, the vows, the exchange of rings, even the idea of a big ceremony have their roots right here. Not in personal expression, but in contracts, powerful symbolism, and the careful drawing of social lines. Let's talk about the wedding ring. Today, it's a beautiful symbol of love and commitment. But in the Middle Ages, its primary purpose was legal. That simple gold band was a contract made visible, a binding agreement recognized by witnesses. It was proof that two families, not just two individuals, had agreed to unite their fortunes and their futures. The circular shape did symbolize eternity, sure, but it also represented the completeness of a legal obligation. Imagine slipping that ring onto your finger in the dim candlelight, feeling the weight of centuries of precedent pressing down, almost invisibly, on your hand. The church didn't just officiate weddings. It policed them. It established what were known as the forbidden degrees of kinship, a complex set of rules preventing marriages between relatives. This wasn't just about morality. It was about power. These rules stopped powerful families from consolidating too much land and influence through intermarriage. Cousins, uncles, and even distant relatives were carefully tracked to prevent disputes over inheritance. It's fascinating that even today, legal restrictions on marriage in many places echo these medieval prohibitions. Subtle reminders that our modern idea of free choice still carries the imprint of centuries-old social control. So, where was the love in all of this? For many, especially the nobility, it was often a secondary concern. Duty, alliance, and social positioning came first. Arranged marriages were the norm, designed to merge property, wealth, and political power. The personal feelings of the bride and groom were rarely the top priority. Yet, even within these rigid structures, you could find small sparks of genuine emotion. A quiet glance across a crowded hall, secret letters passed between castles, fleeting moments of companionship. These were the small glimpses of what would one day blossom into the romantic ideal we cherish today. Even the logistics of a modern wedding are echoes of medieval law. The walk down the aisle, the public vows, the signing of a register with witnesses, it all stems from the church's requirement for a public, verifiable ceremony. The very concept of a wedding day as a special, set-aside date comes from the need to schedule ceremonies around the church calendar, carefully avoiding holy days and periods of fasting like Lent. Imagine an entire village adjusting its daily rhythm of work, prayer, and celebration just to accommodate a single marriage. It was a community affair that marked both a legal contract and a public celebration. And what about the iconic white wedding dress? That's actually a much later adaptation. In the Middle Ages, a bride simply wore her best gown. It was often practical, richly colored, and made from durable fabric. The dress was meant to reflect her family's social rank and wealth, not some abstract idea of purity. Over the centuries, cultural shifts gradually attached the symbolism of virtue and innocence to the color white, transforming a piece of clothing into a powerful ritual statement, layered with new meaning. When you see a bride in white today, you're witnessing the culmination of a centuries-long negotiation between law, custom, and symbolism. It's strange to think that love as the primary reason to get married is a relatively new idea. Legally, the medieval church only required three things for a valid marriage: consent from both parties, a public ceremony, and witnesses. Love was considered a bonus, a desirable but optional extra. It was the stuff of poems, songs, and chivalric romances, not a legal prerequisite. The journey from marriage as an arranged obligation to the delicate dance of duty and affection we recognize today was a long and complex one. So the next time you attend a wedding, look closer. See the invisible threads connecting our modern rituals to the deep past. The vows, the rings, the gathering of friends and family, they are all shaped not just by emotion, but by centuries of legal, ritual, and social history. The medieval world isn't as distant as it seems. Its rules and traditions are quietly embedded in the choices we make today. As we leave the quiet intimacy of the chapel, we move on to our next exploration: fashion and modesty, the dress codes that never died. Join me as we uncover how medieval rules about clothing, color, and fabric still linger in our unspoken dress codes, professional attire, and the subtle language of modern fashion. The sun rises lazily, its first light touching the damp cobblestones with a muted warmth. As you step out into the streets, you can feel the subtle hum of the town waking up. The market is just beginning its day, and the air is filled with the rhythmic clatter of cartwheels and the distant murmurs of early risers. Birds chirp from the timber-bird rooftops, adding their own melody to the morning. Around you, the townspeople are dressed in garments that speak volumes, silently communicating their wealth, their virtue, and their social status. Welcome to medieval Europe, where clothing wasn't just a matter of personal expression. It was a language, a code regulated by law, morality, and a strict social hierarchy. These were known as sumptuary laws, and they dictated the permissible fabrics, colors, and decorations that each social class could wear. Think of it as a society-wide dress code, but with legal consequences. Let's start with color. The color purple, for example, was the ultimate status symbol. It was derived from a tiny sea snail, the murex, and the process was so labor-intensive and costly that only royalty could afford it. This wasn't just a matter of price, it was law. A wealthy merchant, no matter how rich, couldn't simply decide to wear a purple cloak. Doing so could lead to hefty fines, public censure, or even confiscation of the garment. It was a visual reminder that no amount of money could buy you a place in the nobility. Every color had its place, from the earthy browns and greens of the peasantry to the vibrant reds and blues worn by the wealthy. Imagine a wealthy household preparing for the day. The selection of a tunic or gown wasn't just about what looked good. It was a careful calculation, balancing aesthetics with legal precision. Is this shade of scarlet too bold? Is this trend too ornate for our rank? These were the questions that occupied the minds of the medieval elite. Fabrics themselves carried immense meaning. Linen, made from the flax plant, was seen as humble yet virtuous. It was breathable and common, worn by all classes, but the quality and fineness would vary. Wool was the workhorse fabric of the Middle Ages, practical, warm, and ubiquitous. Then you had the luxury materials, silk and velvet. Imported from the East at great expense, these fabrics conveyed power, refinement, and a connection to a wider world. The way silk shimmered in the candlelight, or the way velvet absorbed it, was a statement in itself. Furs were another category entirely, and they were just as tightly regulated as colors. Ermine, with its pure white fur and black-tipped tail, was reserved for the highest echelons of royalty and the clergy. Sable, mink, and fox were for the upper nobility. A commoner wearing such furs would be seen as arrogant, sinful, and dangerously ambitious. Every fold, every hem, and every layer of clothing was an encoded message. As you walk through a medieval marketplace, these subtle differences in attire draw lines of distinction as clearly as any fence or city wall. Let's step inside a tailor's workshop. It's a quiet, purposeful space. You hear the gentle rhythm of scissors slicing through fabric, the soft clatter of pins, and the whisper of looms weaving thread by thread. It's almost a meditative sound. Apprentices move slowly and carefully, learning their craft under the watchful eye of the master tailor. He ensures every stitch is perfect, every garment meeting the exacting standards of both fashion and law. The master tailor wasn't just an artisan. He was a gatekeeper of social order, ensuring his clients looked the part without overstepping their designated rank. Feeling the texture of each fabric, the soft wool, the coarse linen, the gleaming silk, is like reading a story. It speaks as loudly as any word. The church played a huge role in reinforcing these rules, linking clothing directly with morality. Overly luxurious or revealing attire was often condemned from the pulpit as a sign of pride, one of the 7 deadly sins. Simplicity, on the other hand, was praised as a sign of virtue and humility. But these guidelines weren't just about modesty. They were a powerful mechanism of social control. By reinforcing the boundaries of fashion, the church helped ensure that everyone understood and accepted their place in the rigid medieval hierarchy. This visual order was believed to reflect a divine, unchanging order. You might think this is all ancient history, but echoes of these medieval ideas are still with us today. Think about modern dress codes. The sharp suit of a business executive, the crisp uniform of a student, or the elegant gown for a black tie event. All of these subtly dictate conformity, decorum, and hierarchy. They communicate our roles, our intentions, and our respect for a given situation. We may not have laws about wearing purple, but we have unspoken rules about what's appropriate to wear to a job interview versus a barbecue. Picture a noble woman getting ready for an evening gathering. The room is lit by candlelight, which glimmers across the richly embroidered fabrics of her gown. Her servants move in quiet, coordinated steps, preparing her accessories, smoothing the hems, and adjusting the intricate folds of her dress. The gentle rustle of velvet and silk fills the chamber, mixing with the distant sound of laughter from the courtyard below. Every movement she makes, every piece of jewelry she selects, is steeped in centuries of tradition and meaning. Her attire isn't just clothing, it's a performance of her status. But it wasn't just the rich who abided by these rules. Even modest townsfolk and peasants observed unspoken codes. A peasant farmer might not be allowed to wear bright colors, but he and his family would carefully maintain their linen and wool tunics. They would meticulously repair any tears and wash them with gentle diligence. The rhythm of clothing care, the soaking, brushing, and folding, was as much a part of their daily life as working in the fields or tending to their animals. Their clean, well-mended, simple clothes spoke of their own kind of virtue, hard work, thrift, and piety. As evening descends, the bustling streets grow quiet. The soft flicker of lanterns illuminates the cobblestones, still glistening from a passing rain shower. In this gentle glow, the muted sheen of garments, carefully chosen and worn with awareness, stands out. Clothing in medieval Europe was so much more than just fabric. It was a language, a symbol, and a gentle, ever-present guide for social behavior. So the next time you get dressed, whether it's for work, a special occasion, or just a casual day out, take a moment to think about the choices you're making. The echoes of these medieval rules, these intricate codes of fabric and color, still ripple through every stitch and every careful fold of our modern lives. In a way, fashion is a memory, a whisper from a distant world that continues to shape our own, reminding us that what we wear is never just about us. It's about our place in the world. Imagine stepping into a vast stone kitchen deep in the heart of a monastery. The air is thick with the scent of freshly baked bread, a warm, yeasty aroma that mingles with the earthy smell of root vegetables and herbs pulled straight from the garden. A great hearth burns steadily at one end, its flames casting a warm glow across the room and filling the air with a gentle, crackling sound. Life here moves to a different rhythm, a quiet and measured pace where meals are not just about sustenance, but a form of discipline, a structure as essential to the day as prayer itself. In medieval times, the entire year was shaped by fasting schedules dictated by the church. These weren't just personal choices. They were communal practices that everyone observed. Meat was a luxury, reserved for specific feast days. On most other days, the table was filled with fish, grains, legumes, and a surprising variety of vegetables. This religious observance wasn't just about what you ate, but when. It structured daily life from dawn till dusk. Let's think about breakfast. For a monk, the day started long before sunrise. The first meal, often called prandern, was incredibly simple. It might be a small portion of porridge or a piece of bread, just enough to sustain the body through hours of labor in the fields or quiet contemplation in the scriptorium. Picture the scene, the soft morning light filtering through a high window, the air filled with the gentle aroma of barley or oat porridge simmering over the fire, perhaps with a few boiled herbs for flavor. It was a humble start to a day dedicated to work and worship. Now, let's contrast that with life in a noble household. While the meals were far more elaborate, they were still governed by a strict sense of order and structure. A grand dinner might consist of 3 or 4 courses, but each course was modest by our modern standards of feasting. The way food was served was a spectacle in itself, a clear reflection of social hierarchy. The most important guests sat at the high table with the lord and lady, receiving the best cuts of meat and the most intricately prepared dishes. Imagine a great hall lit by flickering candles. Servants move with a quiet, practiced grace, their steps muffled on the stone floor. They carry large wooden trenchers and pewter plates, and the soft, clattering rhythm as they set them down on the long tables is part of the evening's ambiance. Conversation is not loud or boisterous, but measured and respectful. The dishes themselves are arranged to signal status. It wasn't just about showing off wealth. It was about upholding a very specific code of etiquette. The placement of a dish, the person it was served to first, it all had meaning. The meal was a performance of social order. This constant interplay between fasting and feasting didn't just shape people's diets. It fundamentally shaped the very concept of meals as we know them today. Take breakfast, for example. What began as a minor, functional meal for monks and laborers slowly evolved. As society changed, the nobility began to adopt a more substantial morning meal, and over centuries, this trickled down to the wider population, eventually becoming the recognized first meal of the day we know. Similarly, the rules around meat consumption created a powerful social marker. On days when meat was forbidden, everyone ate fish or vegetables. But on the days it was permitted, the ability to serve a large roast or a variety of game birds was a clear sign of privilege and status. Your place in society was visible right there on your plate. For the common folk, the daily diet was built around bread. Potaja, thick stew of grains and vegetables, and whatever they could grow or forage. For the elite, it was roasted meats, expensive spices imported from afar, and delicate pastries. The clatter of wooden spoons in simple bowls versus the glint of silver on a lord's table told a story of 2 different worlds. Even with these differences, there was a shared sense of rhythm that pervaded all of medieval life. In the kitchens, whether in a castle or a monastery, there was a constant, subtle motion. Pots simmered over low fires, the water hissing gently. Herbs and vegetables were chopped with a steady, practiced hand, the sound of the knife on the wooden block punctuating the quiet hum of the room. Every task was part of a larger, unhurried flow. These weren't just chores. They were rituals, repeated with precision day after day. Recipes, often passed down orally, weren't just culinary instructions. They were guides for maintaining balance and order, ensuring that each meal fulfilled both a physical and a spiritual need. As evening fell, life grew even quieter. In the great hall, the fires would be banked, leaving glowing embers that cast long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. The lingering aroma of cooked grains and roasted herbs hung in the air, a comforting reminder of the day's nourishment. The act of eating, whether it was a simple bowl of pottage or an elaborate multi-course feast, was a moment of reflection. It was a practice that reinforced the social and religious order of their world, a quiet meditation enacted through food. It's fascinating to think about how this legacy continues today. The idea of having structured meals at regular times, the concept of 3 meals a day. Even the modern wellness trends that encourage mindful eating or temporary restrictions on certain foods, all of these carry a faint echo of medieval practices. They speak to a deep-seated human need for rhythm and routine in our lives. So the next time you sit down for a meal, take a moment to appreciate the quiet structure of it all. The gentle clink of your fork against the plate, the shared conversation around a table, the simple act of nourishing your body at a set time of day. Each bite, each sip, is a quiet echo of a centuries-old rhythm, a whisper from those kitchens and dining halls that, so long ago, set the pattern for how we eat. It's a connection to a past where food was so much more than just food. It was the very heartbeat of daily life. Picture this, a sunlit courtyard in a medieval castle. Towering stone walls stand silent and majestic, while far-off banners ripple in the gentle morning breeze. Nobles, dressed in fine fabrics, move with a deliberate, unhurried grace. Some are tending to letters, others to accounts, or simply enjoying a moment of leisure. Their world is one of order, a slow, steady rhythm that governs every day. Nearby, knights and stewards are in the fields, supervising the work. You can see the rhythmic, almost hypnotic motion of laborers as they till the soil. The air is filled with a sense of purpose, but it's never rushed, never chaotic. Everyone here knows their role, understands their place in the grand design. This is the heart of feudal life, a system that divided the world with stark clarity. At the top were the nobles, who enjoyed leisure, education, and political influence. They were the thinkers, the planners, the owners. Below them were the peasants, the backbone of the system, whose lives were dedicated to hard physical labor in the fields, stables, and workshops. And connecting these two worlds were the knights, serving as both a military force and as administrative managers, ensuring the smooth operation of the vast estates. It's this structure so orderly and deliberate that I find fascinating. Imagine the pacing of a typical day back then. It begins at dawn with the tending of the fields. Midday brings the duties of estate management, with stewards and knights overseeing supplies, repairs, and the collection of rents. The evening is for reports and planning, as the day's events are recorded and the next day's tasks are set. Everything unfolds in a steady, predictable rhythm. This order wasn't just about tasks. It was deeply embedded in the social fabric. Language itself was a tool of hierarchy. Titles, ranks, and specific forms of address maintained the structure. Words like sir, madam, or your highness weren't just polite. They were constant reminders of one's status, reinforcing the social pyramid at every interaction. This clear division of labor, responsibility, and privilege became completely normalized over centuries. It subtly embedded a social blueprint that surprisingly persists to this very day. Now, let's fast forward. Think about modern workplaces, the offices and bureaucracies we navigate every day. Do you see the echoes? Managers oversee employees, just as stewards oversaw laborers. Tasks are delegated down a chain of command. A distinct hierarchy dictates how we interact, who we report to, and the level of formality we use. Your team lead, your department head, your CEO, it's all a reflection of a medieval system designed for order and efficiency. The organizational chart on your office wall is, in a way, a direct descendant of the feudal hierarchy. Let's go back to the castle and look at the quiet contrasts of daily life. The nobles might be seen hunting, practicing archery, reading, or taking music lessons. We might call these leisure activities, but in their world they were also structured obligations. Hunting wasn't just for fun. It was training for war and a way to display prowess. Reading wasn't just for pleasure. It was a tool of governance and diplomacy. Meanwhile, the laborers, who rise before the sun, find their own rhythm in the fields. Their work is punctuated by the seasons, the weather, and the sheer necessity of survival. It's a life of routine, of repetition, but also of a deep connection to the land and the cycles of nature. Even the smallest gestures throughout the castle are deliberate and patterned. The slight bow of a servant, the careful way a report is presented to a lord, the deference shown to someone of a higher rank, all these actions contribute to a calming, predictable social dance. As evening approaches, the castle slowly quiets down. Knights return from their patrols, their armor clanking softly in the fading light. Servants complete their final duties for the day, and the nobles retreat to their candlelit chambers. The day's rhythm, which began with intense labor and shifted towards leisure and administration, now comes to a gentle close. It's like a carefully choreographed performance, a steady flow of human activity that defined their existence. This quiet order of feudal life didn't just leave an imprint on history books. It shaped the very way we understand authority, hierarchy, and the balance between work and rest. It's easy to think of the medieval period as a distant, almost alien time. But the truth is, its ghost walks among us every day. When you address your boss with a certain level of formality, that's a whisper of the past. When you follow a chain of command to get a project approved, you're participating in a system with ancient roots. The etiquette of your office, the unspoken rules about who can speak in a meeting and when, these are all subtle behaviors guided by a blueprint drawn up centuries ago. The legacy of the feudal system is like a soft, persistent rhythm underlying our own daily lives. It's in the structure of our corporations, our governments, and even our schools. We've replaced lords and peasants with managers and employees, knights with middle management, but the fundamental principle of a hierarchical structure designed for efficiency remains. So the next time you're in a meeting or sending an email up the corporate ladder, take a moment. Listen closely. You might just hear the faint, distant echo of a medieval castle, a world of order, duty, and hierarchy that continues to shape our own centuries later. It has a fascinating connection that reminds us how deeply the past is woven into the fabric of our present. Picture yourself, just for a moment, walking through the stone archways of a monastery at dawn. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of dew-soaked grass from the quiet gardens. A soft, gentle light filters through narrow, stained glass windows, casting muted colors onto the flagstone floor. The silence here is profound, broken only by the gentle scrape of a quill on parchment or the distant murmur of monks reciting their morning prayers. It's in this tranquil rhythm of stone and sunlight that you start to understand how knowledge was once nurtured in a slow, deliberate, and methodical way. In the early medieval period, education was almost entirely the domain of monasteries. Here, monks dedicated themselves not just to prayer, but also to study, transcription, and teaching. Their classrooms weren't bustling or chaotic. They were spaces of quiet concentration where every motion was intentional and every word was measured. The foundation of all learning was the trivium grammar, rhetoric, and logic. These disciplines weren't just about memorizing facts. They were designed to shape the mind, teaching students to think clearly, reason carefully, and communicate with precision. Beyond that, the quadrivium arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy encouraged a calm observation of the natural world, disciplined reasoning, and a quiet appreciation for structure and harmony. Imagine a young novice sitting at a simple wooden desk. Feel the cool touch of the parchment beneath their fingers. Smell the subtle scent of ink, and hear the slight scratch of the quill as letters slowly form on the page. This creates a rhythm that is both calming and meditative. Copying texts wasn't just a chore, it was an exercise in patience and discipline. Every single stroke of the pen reinforced both literacy and mindfulness. Mistakes weren't hastily erased. They were corrected slowly, deliberately, teaching the valuable lesson that learning isn't a race. It's a measured, attentive, and reflective process. Monastic education was also about much more than just acquiring knowledge. Manners, ethics, and moral reflection were woven into the very fabric of the curriculum. Lessons were often intertwined with spiritual guidance. The reading of sacred texts, the contemplation of moral dilemmas, and the memorization of prayers all worked together to cultivate both the intellect and the character. The cadence of chanting, the repetition of lessons, and the gentle whisper of study combined to form an immersive sensory experience. It was an education for the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. As the centuries passed, these monastic foundations gave rise to the very first universities. In cities like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, scholars began to gather more formally, creating new communities of learning. Lecture halls started to echo with the measured recitation of professors, while dormitories housed students in quiet contemplation. The architectural design of these spaces with their high ceilings, long corridors, and cloisters was no accident. It was built to promote focus, reflection, and calm. If you could wander through these ancient halls today, you might still imagine the soft rustle of robes, the gentle tap of wooden sandals on stone floors, and the occasional distant chime marking another hour of study past. These early universities inherited the structured approach of the monasteries. Lessons were carefully timed, subjects were organized hierarchically, and progress was measured methodically. The terms we still use today, bachelor and master, were literal markers of skill and achievement. They reflected a progression of knowledge that had to be earned slowly and with diligence. Education was never seen as a sprint. It was understood to be a lifelong rhythm of study, reflection, and mastery. The sensory experience of learning was also very deliberate. Imagine a room lit only by candlelight. Flames would flicker gently, casting soft shadows that shifted slowly across walls lined with shelves of carefully stacked manuscripts. The faint scent of ink, parchment, and wax would mingle with the aroma of herbs drifting in from a nearby garden. Monks and students alike moved at a measured pace, their footsteps blending into the serene ambience of study. Every single action, from opening a book to reciting a line aloud, was intentional. It contributed to a rhythm that was as much meditative as it was intellectual. Even the act of memorization, which was so central to medieval education, had a calming quality. Repetition, whether in chanting, recitation, or transcription, created a predictable, soothing pattern. Knowledge was absorbed slowly, deliberately, and with great care. It's a world away from our fast-paced lives, where information rushes in at every moment. Medieval learning unfolded like a gentle stream, its current steady and unhurried. This disciplined rhythm extended far beyond the classroom. Meals, prayer, work, and rest were all intertwined with study, creating a holistic environment in which life itself became an exercise in patience, attention, and quiet observation. Students learned not just facts, but how to live in a measured, reflective way. They learned to appreciate the beauty of structure, the importance of order, and the quiet satisfaction of mastery earned through time and effort. As modern viewers, when we think of classrooms, textbooks, or even structured work schedules, we are, in a way, still walking in the footsteps of these monastic systems. The calm, deliberate routines of medieval scholars echo in the soft cadence of a lecture, the gentle rhythm of reading, and the comforting predictability of a school day. What they teach us is that learning, when approached as a slow, intentional practice, can become a source of quiet pleasure, a meditative journey, and a powerful reminder that knowledge is best absorbed not in haste, but in rhythm with the passage of time. Now, imagine the twilight of the monastery as the day winds down. The sunlight wanes, casting long shadows over the stone corridors and cloisters. Students close their books slowly, monks put away their quills, and a serene silence settles over the space. The gentle flow of hours, the repetition of study and prayer, and the rhythmic cadence of learning have left an imprint not only on the mind, but on the spirit. It's a profound lesson in patience, focus, and the enduring beauty of education as a calm, deliberate journey through time. Imagine a quiet, misty morning in a small medieval village. A thin fog drifts slowly over the fields, curling gently around stone cottages and timber-bird houses. In the distance, a church tower rises, its bell tolling a measured deep note that drifts lazily across the landscape. This sound, this rhythm, wasn't just a marker of time. It was a constant reminder of life's fragility. In medieval Europe, death was never distant or abstract. It was a constant, rhythmical presence, woven into the very fabric of daily life, community, and social expectation. Today, we often see death as a sudden, jarring interruption. But for people in the Middle Ages, it was a slow, deliberate process, guided by rituals designed to honor the dead while comforting the living. Funerals weren't rushed. They were solemn processions that moved at a measured pace through winding village streets. Picture it. Mourners clad in somber garments, their faces calm and composed, with candles flickering gently in their hands. Each gesture, each motion was prescribed by tradition. The precise placement of hands, the respectful lowering of heads, even the spacing between participants in the procession. This rhythm was deeply comforting. It was predictable and meditative, allowing grief to unfold gently, without the chaos or panic we might associate with loss. It was a structured dance of sorrow. Graveyards themselves were not places of fear, but spaces of reflection and memory. Stone markers, carefully carved by local artisans, rose above the earth. Each one told a story in a muted, humble language, a testament to a life lived. Villagers would walk slowly among the graves, their footsteps soft on the grass. They might offer quiet prayers, leave small tokens like a wildflower or a polished stone, or simply stand in quiet contemplation. The very layout of these spaces encouraged calm movement and introspection. Winding paths invited a slow, meandering journey. Low stone walls provided a place to rest and reflect. Scattered trees created natural pauses, inviting visitors to stop and engage with their thoughts and memories. It was a physical landscape designed for a spiritual journey. The rituals of mourning were as sensory as they were procedural, creating a full-body experience of remembrance. Imagine the soft rustle of heavy wool or linen fabric as people moved. The gentle flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows on stone walls. The faint sweet aroma of incense and dried herbs meant to purify the air and honor the deceased. These elements combined to create a slow, immersive experience that engaged all the senses. In larger towns and cities, the funeral bells, or the death knell, were a powerful auditory anchor. They marked the passing of one of their own, reminding the entire community of their shared mortality. Yet this steady tolling sound also provided a strangely comforting auditory rhythm, a heartbeat for the grieving community that was steady and unwavering. Even children learned to understand and participate in these ceremonies from a young age. They learned by observing, moving quietly beside their parents and elders, absorbing the measured gestures of the adults. Through this quiet participation, they absorbed profound lessons about respect, mortality, and the importance of memory. It was an education in empathy and communal responsibility, taught not through lectures but through shared lived experience. Death was fundamentally a communal affair. It was never faced alone. When someone passed away, the entire village or neighborhood rallied. Neighbors supported one another through grief, bringing food to the bereaved family, helping with chores, and attending wakes that often lasted for days. These acts of care and observation created a slow, steady social rhythm that cocooned the grieving family in a web of support. Mourning wasn't just a private sorrow. It was a shared, structured experience, a gentle dance of empathy and ritual that reinforced the bonds of the community and ensured that no one was left to navigate their loss in isolation. At the heart of this system were the monasteries and churches. They were the spiritual centers that played a pivotal role in memorializing the dead long after the funeral was over. Prayers were said daily for the souls of the departed. Candles were kept burning on altars as sites of perpetual remembrance. The slow, methodical repetition of prayer, the turning of pages in beautifully illuminated missals, and the gentle tolling of monastery bells provided a sense of continuity and reassurance. In these sacred spaces, life and death were interwoven. The rituals created a living meditation on impermanence and continuity, a slow reflection that prepared the living to carry forward with both respect for the past and calm acceptance of the future. Even personal mourning followed a set of unwritten, yet universally understood rules. A person's clothing, gestures, and daily behavior were carefully codified to reflect their state of grief. Black or other subdued colors were worn to mark the period of mourning. Certain movements and expressions were deemed appropriate, while overt displays of excess or frivolity were discouraged. This structured approach didn't suppress grief. Instead, it transformed the raw, overwhelming pain of loss into a gentle, orderly rhythm. It provided a map, a guide for the mourner, helping them navigate the treacherous waters of sorrow without being completely overwhelmed by the storm. You might be thinking this all sounds very distant, a relic of a bygone era. But modern echoes of these practices are everywhere, even if they are more muted. Think about the moments of silence we observe at public gatherings to honor the fallen. Think of memorial services, the quiet visits to gravestones on an anniversary, or even the simple act of lighting a candle for a loved one. These all trace their roots back to these medieval rituals. The emphasis on order, rhythm, and sensory detail, soft light, gentle sound, measured movement persists because it works. It creates a protected space in which grief can be felt, memory can be honored, and life can be resumed with a sense of calm reflection. As evening descends over our imaginary medieval village, the fog thickens, softening outlines and blurring the boundaries between the living and the dead. Candles flicker in cottage windows, small beacons of warmth and life, and the gentle toll of the church bell continues its steady rhythm, marking the passage of time and the enduring presence of memory. In this world, life, death, and remembrance flow together in a slow, meditative stream. Through these quiet, deliberate practices, medieval people taught us a profound lesson. They showed us that respect for life, attention to ritual, and the gentle, structured marking of absence can transform the experience of death. It can change it from something abrupt, chaotic, and frightening into something reflective, structured, and deeply soothing. In the end, the echo of medieval mourning practices whispers through our own modern world, even in its frantic pace. They remind us that death is not just an end, but part of life's natural rhythm. They show us that nurturing memory can be a form of gentle meditation. And most importantly, they teach us that respect, order, and shared ritual can bring a sense of calm and peace to even the most universal and challenging of all human experiences. So the next time you walk among gravestones, listen to the slow toll of a distant bell, or observe the quiet gestures of care at a memorial, take a moment. You are invited to move through life and death with patience, reverence, and a soft, enduring sense of peace. Thank you for joining me on this journey back in time.